Alright, so what I'm trying to do here is clean up the wiring harness a little bit. Starting from the back and working my way to the front, I've got the original tail light and turn signal connectors that will connect to these connectors eventually on the rear subframe here. And you know, these bikes came with an accessory harness for, you know, fairings, and I think even for a sidecar. That's no longer necessary, and obviously factory, a lot of the wiring would have connected to the components in this area of the bike that's no longer here. So you've got examples like this long tail wire that just connects to the blinker relay that I'm going to cut back. So the goal here ultimately is to simplify the harness, make it so it's hidden, and make it a little easier to manage. I mean, right down here I've got this mess of wires going down to the battery box that I need to clean up, and just simplify it. All this isn't as necessary as it used to be, so a little bit of a headache, not exactly what I was expecting to do all day today, but you know, that's part of having this kind of project, is running into these unexpected things and making them right. So ideally I'll have the connectors hooked up back here to the tail light and turn signals, and a lot of this wiring simplified because it's not as long as it's too long basically than it needs to be, and then all of this tucked up right in here in a nice little wrap, and then tucked underneath the gas tank up here, with everything just kind of hidden up here towards the front, and just a simple connector down here for the taillights in the back. Should look pretty good. It's just a matter of picking through all these wires and cleaning them up and shortening them and making sure everything is in the right place. Okay, so the first thing I tackled was shortening that turn signal wire, which went to the turn signal relay. And what I'm trying to do is trying to basically compress everything so that's underneath the tank and hidden. And once I've got it hidden underneath the tank area, there's plenty of room underneath there, which is cool. I hit it with a zip tie. So one area of the harness that I found was particularly too long was the stator harness, which is a 4-wire setup that I believe links right to the rectifier. So what I'm doing here is cutting back that harness and reattaching the plug to make it nice and short. It's probably about, I don't know, 6 to 8 inches too long. What this will do is just eliminate all that unnecessary wire that I'd either have to stuff down in the battery box or leave hanging above the frame there, which would be, you know, kind of unsightly. In order to reuse the factory connector, I used a pair of needle nose pliers, and what you can do is you can very carefully insert them into the back of the plug and pop the original connector out, so you can keep all the factory connectors intact. So with the LED taillight pigtails, what I did was tuck them behind the strut and then wired them directly into the factory harness. I felt like at this point the plugs weren't necessary anymore, and with a little shrink wrap and some electrical wrapping, I was able to simplify this entire setup. And when it's finally complete, the harness against the black frame disappears pretty well. So I ended up being pretty happy with the way this setup was done. And I'm actually curious how other owners of this kit have done the harness. I could imagine a way of drilling a hole in the frame and actually tucking all the wires inside of the frame, but at this point in the project I was a little bit too far along to do something like that. So maybe in the next bike I'll try doing a mod where I run the frame, I run the harness through the frame itself. It could be pretty cool. I'm just trying to figure out a way to get the wires in and out and keep it all tidy and neat. Okay, with the carbons back on, it was time to do a quick test. And there's your tail lights and your brake lights. The nice thing about LEDs is that they are very low in terms of the power requirements and particularly bright. So one thing I haven't done yet is drill the hole that attaches the back of the tank to the BBCR frame bracket. So I've actually decided to stick with the original chrome hardware for the fuel tank. I think it complements the bike well, and looks pretty good as is. So the first thing I need to do is center the tank on the bracket, and then I'm going to go ahead and use a Sharpie to set my hole. Now I noticed the Sharpie is at a slight angle. That's because that back tab on the gas tank actually mates with the bracket at a slight angle as well. Now, as you've probably seen before, for drilling, I typically start with a small pilot hole and then work my way up to a larger drill bit. Okay, so next I'm test fitting the stainless steel bolt that I plan on using for the back of the tank. Looks like it fits perfectly. Now time to retest the fitment of the tank to the bracket. And after everything's properly aligned, looks like it fits pretty good. So what I need to do next is modify the rear tank mount, meaning that small rubber tab at the end of the tank. Factory, that would have mated with the seat, but since it's all going to be exposed, I think it needs a little bit better treatment. So I stopped by Lowe's, picked up a few different hardware items to see if I can't build something that looks good there, but also has a bit of a factory look to it. So after trying a few different options, what I ended up finding was one of those, I think they're like radiator mounts. They're chrome from an old CX that I had, and it looks like it's going to fit pretty well. And coincidentally, it's the same diameter for the bolt to pass through, so I think it's going to look good. So I also need to modify the original rubber mount. I bought some O-rings and a couple different bushings, but I just wasn't really comfortable with using them. So what I'm doing is just modifying the original rubber mount to be a small circular, basically rubber gasket between the chrome bracket piece and the tank. So what's going to happen here is the chrome piece is going to sit on the rubber bushing, and I'm going to use a couple nylon spacers to just slightly lift the tank off the bracket to avoid any chipping paint. And then I'm going to have a nylon lock bolt on the underside holding it all together. And that should be plenty for this application. Okay, so everything is starting to come together. And what I'm finding is, for some reason, now the bolt's not passing through the hole. So it would appear that once everything's put back together, my angle must be slightly off. So of course that means I have to take the tank back off and then refit the hole and basically just open it up a little bit with the drill bit. Alright, much better. At this point everything went back together and fit pretty well. As you can see, I've got a stainless steel Allen bolt, which is metric, connected to or passing through this chrome washer that I found that appears to be a radiator mount bolt, and then that's all held together through a nylon washer and a nylon locking bolt underneath the tank. So at this point, with the tank mounted, the last thing I need to do on the BBCR Engineering bracket is mount the seat. So pretty straightforward. The seat has two studs on the bottom which pass through the bracket, and I've just got to bolt it down and tighten everything up. The one last thing I wanted to do was get a good idea of the seating position with the seat finally mounted up and the tank properly mounted. And since it was midday, I thought, hey, why not be a little ambitious and take the bike off the stand, and why not take it for a little test drive around the block? So here I'm removing the stand, and it came off pretty easily. I just had it held on through its original rod, I suppose, and spring. And despite not having any video of taking the bike off the stand, it just basically comes down a ramp and the bike's in the ground. Looking pretty good. And I'm honestly pretty excited about this point. Alright, so despite not having a muffler, I figured why not take it for a quick test drive around the block? Alright, by this point I didn't know what was up, but I knew that if I kept cranking it over, I'd eventually start to damage that little lithium battery. So I'm going to charge it up and see you next time. Thanks for watching.